Growth rarely happens in a straight line. It comes through new opportunities, unexpected challenges, meaningful relationships, and the lessons we learn along the way. Grow with Granite shares real conversations about personal, professional, and business growth, offering practical insight, honest experiences, and encouragement to help inspire your next step. Because wherever you are on your journey, there is always room to grow.
Welcome to our first kickoff episode. In this first series, we're going to focus on helping young professionals transition into the real world. We want to provide some real-world takeaways to help set up young professionals for long-term success. Alternatively, maybe your organization is growing. We hope these considerations are valuable for you as well as you refine your focus on attracting top talent. First things first, there's this unspoken period of life where an enormous amount of quote-unquote real learning happens. Those first 3 to 5 years out of college, military, high school, whenever people are really transitioning into that first grown-up job, if you will, the way you set yourself up during this period will have an enormous impact on your life moving forward. And I was really fortunate to get some great advice early on from my predecessor at the agency, Mr. Neil Annis, who essentially taught me that choosing to live like I had for the last 3 years when I was a young professional and just entering the workforce would make all the difference and would be one of the most wise decisions possible if I chose to live that way for the first couple of years in that new role. And while all your friends are kind of going out and buying the nice car or leasing the nicer apartment and going on their first vacations, that can be kind of a little bit of a tear in your head. And just kind of emotionally speaking, it's like, at one point you want to have those experiences and do those cool things that you feel like you've been saving up for and held back from. But at the same time, if you're willing to make those decisions early on and live like nobody else through that period of time, you really set yourself up to live like nobody else can later on. And so very similarly in that vein, we're going to talk about some of the realities of what transitioning into the real world and the workforce looks like for young professionals. And several years ago, a book, A CEO Only Does Three Things by Trey Taylor came out, and it's really focused around the three things that a CEO needs to focus most on, being culture, people, and numbers. And it's really also a great lens for young professionals to look at things through, because the similarity between a senior executive and a young professional is that you need to take in a lot of information at a very high level and make really important decisions relatively quickly. And so for that reason, I want to actually take the whole concept of culture, people, and numbers and break that down and talk through the key considerations that you should look for with respect to each of those. And when you think about it, culture really trumps everything. That's the most important factor. I'm sure you've heard people talk about company culture. It's really become a buzzword over the last couple of years. Additionally, in addition to culture, having the right people around you, having them in the right seats within a company, and embodying the way that they work around you and the impact that they have on you can be really powerful. And then numbers is ultimately a trailing indicator or a lagging indicator that tells us, are we or are we not driving the results that we want to drive? And so we're going to talk about how each of those factors are things you should consider as a young professional transitioning into a new role. And we're going to start off this week with looking at culture. And in this episode, we're going to take a little bit deeper dive on what that means for young professionals. And these concepts will broadly apply to many industries. But before we get started, here's a shameless plug about the insurance industry specifically. Number one, insurance is probably the best kept secret in business. And so if you come to this podcast wanting to know more about insurance, the opportunities that exist for young professionals, it's not touted as being the most sexy industry in the world. It's kind of an old school industry. When you think about it, it's been around for a long time. There's very much an old guard. And not so many years ago, I think insurance industries were kind of, when young professionals thought about it, they immediately got visions of, manila colored file cabinets lining the walls and mallard green carpet. And I remember when that was the reality. And in a lot of ways, it's not anymore. There's been a huge amount of innovation over the last couple of years. Certainly at our organization, we've really modernized the way things are done. Particularly at Granite, we get to work with clients from coast to coast and through all different types of cultures around the country, really get to interact with some amazing people. And, unexpected events occur all the time. Insurance really greases the skids, so to speak, for every other industry within the American economy and even beyond. As long as there are people taking out loans and banks and financial institutions lending money, that debt has to be secured with collateral that's got to be secured by insurance. And so there will forever be opportunity in the insurance marketplace. And as long as governments are governing, then we've got to put forth and satisfy, financial requirements. There's regulations that need to be insured for. And so it really is a very stable career. There are amazing long-term opportunities. And insurance closes many of those loops that would otherwise remain open and be impossible for us to work through from an economic perspective. And so overall, insurance has a really low barrier to entry. You don't need a medical degree. You don't have to go to law school. You don't need any grad school to be very successful in this business. And there's very high earning potential. And so it's one of those things that I think sleeps on a lot of people. The insurance industry has a lot of opportunities. The thing is, in our economy today, though, insurance is not the only industry with that kind of opportunity. There's a ton of opportunity for hard-charging individuals with growth mindset to come in and really make their mark and do quite well for themselves. And regardless of which of those industries you end up deciding to move forward with, I hope that the things that we talk about here are going to apply well for you. So let's talk through the 7 key factors that must be evaluated when you're looking at any new position, especially entry-level professional roles. The first is, what kind of company do you want to work for? Do you want to work for a smaller organization or a larger organization? There's obvious pros and cons to either. One of the things I think that we get captivated by with a larger organization sometimes is the notoriety or the prestige that comes with working with a huge corporation or conglomerate that's a household name. When you go to Thanksgiving, Aunt Sally's going to know about, enter XYZ large company. Whereas if you go to work for a smaller enterprise, maybe that's not always the case. The key difference there is, especially if you have a growth mindset and a company is very committed to long-term growth, then getting in at the ground level of a smaller organization that's riding the wave up to becoming a larger organization is a really excellent place to be and can open up a plethora of important opportunities. And so don't sleep on the really small organizations. Sometimes the right mindset, the right team can do amazing things. We've experienced some of that at Granite Insurance, and I know there's other organizations that have experienced similar scenarios. The other thing is this company, are they growth-oriented or are they profit-centric? And either can be perfectly fine, and depending on your skill set and your preferences, maybe either would appeal to you. But there's 3 different kinds of companies when you think about growth-oriented versus being profit-centric that I want you to think about. And the first is, you've got lifestyle companies. Nothing wrong with these. These tend to be relatively small, kind of mom and pops organizations, and they maintain a great lifestyle for the ownership. But oftentimes those really, really small organizations have a limited amount of opportunity for you to grow with them if they primarily exist only to sustain a particular lifestyle for the ownership. The second kind of profit-centric company that you might interact with or come across is one that's really focused on shareholder return. And this is really important for all companies. Like, that is why many businesses exist, why all businesses exist to a certain point, is to ultimately create a shareholder return. But that can't be everything. And if that's the primary focus, as it is in a number of businesses, then again, there may be some growth that can potentially be stifled there. And so one of the things that I would really encourage you to do is, when you're looking at companies, how do they talk about growth? When they talk about performance, are they talking about growth metrics? Are they talking about profit metrics? Or are they talking about the two in tandem? The two in tandem can be super healthy and lead to a lot of opportunities, but it is absolutely imperative that growth is a primary focus for an organization, especially if you're coming in. You want to get as much experience as possible, and being with a growth-oriented firm where you can grow with it is really, really important. Anytime that you see a growth-oriented company, that's going to lead to more opportunities, and we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. The other thing that you might want to think about when you're thinking about what kind of company you want to work for is their reputation as a corporate citizen. Does this company stand for the things that you believe in? There's lots of different companies. There's lots of different executives who make a lot of different decisions, who align with lots of different tastes and preferences and belief systems. And so it's really important to make sure that you're not cutting across the grain within that organization, or you're going to be continually dissatisfied with leadership's position that they take on things. And so making sure that you've got great value alignment in the way that they interact and participate as a corporate citizen is really important, and something that you definitely shouldn't just push to the wayside, because that's the kind of thing that can really become a festering splinter for you long term. Is, when the going gets tough, or you have a hard day or a hard week, if you don't share the alignment from a values perspective with leadership and with the rest of the company, it's really going to isolate yourself, and that's just not a healthy place to be. The other thing is, would you be comfortable being the average of the people that you're going to work the most closely with? When you think about the 5 to 7 people that you're going to work, right in tandem with or shoulder to shoulder with, the people who are on your team, maybe it's a remote or a hybrid environment where people are spread out all over the country. The people that you're interacting with, are you comfortable being the average of those people? And if the answer for an organization that you're kind of vetting out or going through the hiring process is no, you should probably take pause there and really evaluate, is this the opportunity for you? Because you want to be with an organization where you're going to be able to prosper and succeed, and you don't feel like you're contributing more than you're being able to take away, or that you're not contributing at all and that you're kind of you become the weight that everybody else is dragging. There's a certain balance that has to be taken there. As a young professional, you're not going to know everything. Nobody expects you to know everything, or shouldn't, coming in. But it is really important that you surround yourself with people that you respect and admire and that you want to be like, because as you spend more time with them, ultimately you will start being more like those people. Second thing to consider, in addition to what kind of company do you want to work for, second point is, know what you don't want to do. And this is a little bit backwards from the way a lot of people look at this, I think. And this is where job shadow opportunities and internships pay real dividends. When you get to take on an experience for 6, 8, 12, 14 weeks, whatever the internship or apprenticeship program is, and you get to test drive a company and kind of see behind the curtains and see how things actually work, it's a really good opportunity for you. And I would encourage anybody, if you're going in and you're going to be doing any type of engagement like this, whether it's internship, whether it's an apprenticeship or a job shadow, go into it through the lens of, today I want to come away knowing what I don't want to do. And the reason that that's so important is it really sets yourself up for success when you're narrowing down what types of positions that you're looking for. And it's only a bonus if you find out what you do want to do, or exactly where you do want to be. What you really need to know is where your strengths are going to be really put to the best use. And you want to make sure that you're not trying to put yourself in a position where the reality is your skill set that you bring to the table is actually going to keep you or hinder you from being successful in a particular role or an organization. Because I know myself, for example, when I went into college, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew exactly what my major was going to be and exactly kind of how my career was going to unfold. And none of that happened. Like I mentioned, those first 3 to 5 years out of college, you kind of go through those resets and you learn what actually matters to you, where your skill sets are actually going to be maximized. And so the earlier you find out where your skill sets fit into things, the better off you're going to be. The third point is, don't limit yourself to a specific path. Even in the insurance space, particularly in the independent agency side of things, sales isn't the only option. Generally speaking, for a lot of insurance agencies, 25 to 30% of the entire workforce is in a direct sales position. There's lots of opportunities on the IT side, on the operations side, marketing, risk placement, risk management, loss control, claims. There's tons of opportunities in this business. And so a lot of times we see the headliner role, or the role that gets the most notoriety and attention, and don't realize how much other opportunities there are. So don't pigeonhole yourself and think, I'm going to go down this specific career path. Kind of keep your eyes wide open, especially when you're going through those internship and job shadow opportunities. Make sure that you're really doing a candid evaluation of, where are my strengths, where are my weaknesses, and where can I sit to maximize my strengths and ultimately lead to my long-term success. Fourth consideration, find the work environment that's right for you. Some people prefer in-person, some people like hybrid, some people want to be entirely remote. This one is probably where I'm going to ruffle some feathers a little bit. I don't think that remote is the best option for many young professionals who are entering the workforce. I know that hybrid options are great. Some people want to be truly remote or 100% remote just because of the flexibility that offers with travel and proximity and all those other considerations. I get that. But ultimately, proximity is going to matter a great deal if you're truly committed to success and long-term growth. And what I really mean by proximity is, how accessible are you to upper management, and how accessible is upper management to you? If you're 1,000 miles away or 10 miles away or 1 mile away, for that matter, you may be doing a really good job, but if it doesn't get the attention of people who are making big decisions, you're likely not to be one of those big decisions, or one of those people who are getting the promotion and kind of really taking outsized steps within the organization as it continues to grow. And so there's nothing right or wrong wrong about that. And I'm not saying that that's the most fair thing in the world, but that's the way the world actually works. And so proximity matters. The more time, I would argue, in most organizations, the more time you spend inside the walls of that organization, interacting in a meaningful way with the team, including senior leadership, the better off you're going to be and the further you're going to go in your company. So find the work environment that's right for you, but take into consideration how promotions happen, how much relationships matter, and what effect that has on your success. The fifth point that you should consider is, what's the onboarding process look like? And this isn't so much, what's step 1, 2, and 3? What training course do I need to go through before I go through the other one? Do I go through a pre-licensing class before I sit for agency management training? And, for any other industry, this may look totally different as far as step 1, step 2, step 3. It's directionally correct, though. What the focus here is not so much on what is actually happening in the training process or the onboarding process, but what you should be evaluating. And when you're asking these questions in an interview process, or even as a candidate, maybe you're at a career fair or something like that, when you're evaluating how people go about their onboarding process, do they cast a broad net where they're going to hire multiple people, maybe 6, 7, or 8 people, for knowing that most of them are going to wash out of their training process? They're going to be making minimal investments, and they're essentially under the assumption that the couple of people who make it through their particular training program are the people for them, and they're going to stick for the long term. And all the other people that wash out of the process are just, that's part of the process for them. That's a really cheap way of doing things, in my opinion, from a training perspective. What I think is better, and something that you should look for, is this company willing to make deep investments in me? Am I coming in with one particular role in mind, where this company has hired me to do X, Y, Z, to sit in this seat, to take on these responsibilities? They're going to roll out their training responsibilities and resources I need to be successful in this role long term. If they're willing to make those one-on-one investments and pour into you in that way, it's a pretty good indication that they're willing to invest in your growth for the long term, and that they're going to set you up for future success. And so it's one of those things, if you're going in where multiple associates are being hired for what will ultimately boil down to just a couple of positions, it's a really good indicator that they're not willing to invest really deeply in you right out of the gate, and they're not going to be as invested in your long-term success as you are. So that's another one of those considerations to look for. The sixth consideration is career tracks. And career tracks are great, but they're not everything. And this is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, is career tracks can't be one size fits all. They're really good to indicate, hey, how does this company, as of today, envision this role evolving over time? If I do X, Y, and Z, and I have this much experience, what does the next level of this position look like, or the next iteration? What steps am I going to take? What promotions are kind of pre-laid out for me to where I can go from one to the next to the next? And there's a lot of benefit of that, and that's one of the areas that a lot of people gravitate towards the larger corporations we talked about, is because there are clearly defined career tracks. But don't limit yourself to these established hierarchies. The cool thing about smaller organizations that are really growth oriented is we get to do a lot of career crafting. And so it may be that there's not XYZ role within an organization today, but if they experience outsized growth, then there may be in a couple of years. And if that's something where your skill set is going to be really applicable, odds are that business owner probably already has that in mind. And if they don't, there's plenty of opportunity for you to share your interest and passion in those areas. But ultimately, winners craft their own path. And so, I think that the downside of career tracks, is a lot of people interpret them is, okay, this is box A, this is box B, this is box C, and I've got to progress from one to the other in this lateral format. And odds are, if you focus on that too much, what you're going to end up doing is negating the opportunities for really big opportunities, or maybe something that's outside of those boxes that are predefined. Most of the most successful people I know have gone from the bottom of an organization to the top of the organization, not because they were reliant on a particular career track. That said, career tracks are a great tool to know that a company does expect and anticipate growth within a particular role. And so that's just one of those things. Some people really love the red tape or the bureaucracy or the process and system in place to know, if I do X, Y, and Z by this date and time, then my next promotion is going to land and it's going to mean this. That's perfectly fine. I would just encourage you, if you're a really hard charging type and really growth oriented, don't just limit yourself to that, because you can often way overshoot those projections and opportunities if you keep your nose to the grindstone and really perform in a meaningful way. And, as often as not, I'm going to say even more often than not, the people who are willing, and this is one of those things where people see this very differently, and I know our culture has shifted and changed in a lot of different ways, but this has held true for as long as I can think of and as long as I've ever heard tell. If you do more than you're paid for today, it won't be long before you're paid for more than you do. And that's something where, your career track and what you're contributing to an organization, when you're in these first 3 to 5 years, you've got 3 to 5 years to bank that on. Time passes really fast, guys. And if you're willing to put those investments in, I'm not telling you that it should be all upside and that you should put yourself in a position where a company's taking advantage of you. That's not this message at all. But if you're committed to a company long term, you're excited about where the organization's going, you want to thrive and succeed with that organization, it's okay. In fact, it will be imperative for your personal success to give it your all and to make these couple of years, these are the years where you're really going to be able to grind and contribute and maybe not have the same commitments outside of work that you will in pretty short order. Take this time to really earn your stripes, to get the experience, to understand what you're doing and how you can use levers and the leverage that you've got within your strengths to maximize your personal success long term. That's enough about career tracks. The final consideration that I really want to focus on is growth trajectory of the company. When companies start focusing on organic growth, it means a lot of things, and it should tell you a lot. If you're sitting in a position where you're going through the interview process, you're at a career fair, the reality is high growth will absolutely require higher levels of adaptability. There's just no way around it. As organizations are growing and transforming themselves, things have to change. And every time an organization kind of gets to a new threshold, any business I can think of, they're kind of stratified by size. The two-person organization is not going to operate the same as an organization with a staff of 2,000. And so as they grow through the steps, what kept them from or the things that made them successful and enabled them to get past this threshold or from level A to level B is going to keep them from crossing the next threshold. And so being adaptable is just highly important. The other thing I would encourage you to look for as you're at career fairs, job shadows, you're going through this interview process is, what do the organizational age demographics look like? Is most of senior leadership nearing retirement? What do people, between retirement and entry-level positions look like? There's a couple of things to kind of have an eye on there. Number one is, what is the long-term outlook for this company? Is it being built to grow it and to sustain it, or is it being built to sell it? Maybe there's not as long of a tenure for you to be able to be successful in this role. Maybe that's not the right opportunity if it's going to be quick flipped and you don't get the opportunity to kind of earn your stripes and get the experience you really wanted out of it. Also, if there are missing generations within an organization, especially in the insurance business, for example, there's times when maybe this generation is missing and there's broader opportunities for you to take on more senior leadership earlier on. There's going to be a higher responsibility on you at that point to step up and take on some leadership and to be very responsible for a number of things and probably take on outsized responsibilities. But maybe you have the opportunity to be a lot more successful than you thought, a lot faster than you thought. This has nothing to do with is one age demographic better than the other, but there's certain makeups in organizations sometimes where there's glaring gaps. And if you can get really good at spotting, there's a substantial need, or, this particular 15-year age band is really not well represented, does that present an opportunity for you? Kind of think about that differently. As we wrap things up, remember the 7 things to consider when evaluating a company from a culture perspective. What kind of company do you want to work for? Know what you don't want to do. Don't limit yourself to a specific path. Sales isn't the only option. Find the work environment that's right for you. What does the onboarding process look like? Are career tracks established? And what are the expectations of those? And organizational growth trajectory. We hope you're able to take some insights away from this episode, and we look forward to talking more about how to evaluate the people and numbers considerations through the lens of a young professional over the next couple of episodes. Until then, thanks for growing with Granite.